Your grandmother kept emergency cash in a coffee can above the fridge. Not because she didn't trust banks. She just didn't trust herself not to spend it if she couldn't see it. A red Maxwell House tin pushed to the back. It never grew. It never moved. It just sat there, waiting for something bad to happen. That image is your entire financial education. Nobody sat you down and said, "We are poor." Nobody gave you a book called "Here's Why You'll Struggle with Money." It was quieter than that. It was the way your mother's jaw tightened when the car made a new noise. The way your father changed the subject whenever someone mentioned retirement. The way every conversation about the future eventually hit a wall. An invisible one made of habit, history, and the unspoken belief that people like you don't end up with more than they started with. You absorbed it completely, without realizing you were doing it. Money became a source of shame before you were old enough to understand what money was. You learned not to ask for things, not because anyone was cruel, but because the look on their faces when you asked was worse than going without. That look taught you something deeper than any classroom ever could. Wanting more was dangerous. Ambition was something other people had. The correct posture was gratitude, not hunger. And for a long time you believed it. The ceiling was invisible because nobody ever pointed at it. You just kept growing until you hit it, and then you stopped growing because that's what everyone around you had done. But something felt wrong. A low-grade static in your chest that wouldn't go away. A sense that the map you were given didn't match the actual terrain. And then one day something cracked. You're 17. Or 22. The age doesn't matter, the moment does. You're sitting somewhere ordinary when a single thought lands with the quiet force of a crowbar. These people didn't start with more than me. They just decided the ceiling wasn't real. That thought is both the best and hardest thing that will ever happen to you. It doesn't feel like empowerment at first. It feels like vertigo, like you stepped off a ledge and you're not sure if there's ground below or just more air. You start reading obsessively, quietly. You don't tell anyone, because you already know how it would land in your circle. Ambition gets treated like a foreign body, identified and attacked. So you stay quiet. You read at night. You fill notebooks with ideas that feel both obvious and impossible. You try your first thing. It fails. Or it limps along for months before dying quietly. What matters isn't whether it worked. What matters is that you tried. Which means you've already separated yourself from 90% of the people who will spend their lives saying, "I should have," and "I almost." But separation has a price. Your friends stop inviting you out. Not maliciously, they just stopped expecting you to say yes. Your family starts asking questions with an edge. When is this going to turn into something real? You take a real loss, not a small one. You sit with that specific, humiliating number and figure out what it says about you. There's a 3 a.m. moment where the whole thing feels genuinely stupid. The voice that sounds exactly like every person who ever doubted you gets loud and reasonable. You sit with it. Then you get up, not because you're made of something special, but because going back is no longer an option. The version of you that accepts the ceiling no longer exists. You burned the bridge on that side. 2 or 3 years in, your bank account still doesn't reflect the hours you've put in. This is the part nobody posts about. Your friends have normal lives that are starting to look, if not glamorous, at least restful. Your family is worried. Your mother offers you money she doesn't have. You lose people not dramatically but gradually. Some drift because they don't know how to relate to the version of you that stopped shrinking. Some relationships that made sense when you were both at the same altitude start to buckle once you aren't. There's guilt too. The specific kind that comes from watching people you love still worry about money while you could write a check that would end that worry, and not knowing how to do it without changing something irreversible between you. Something is working, though. You can feel it before you can see it. The first real win arrives on an ordinary Tuesday. Maybe it's the first month your side income covers your rent. Maybe it's a number in your account that 2 years ago would have seemed like a typo. It's quiet. You close the laptop and go to bed because there's no one to call who would understand what the number actually means. Not because they're unintelligent, because they haven't lived the days that produced it. That quiet win does something important. For the first time, you believe not just intellectually but in your body that the ceiling is breakable. What gets harder is the stakes. Because now it's real, which means it can be lost. You become protective in a way that borders on paranoia. You reinvest everything. You stay uncomfortable on purpose. The first win is proof. It's not arrival. It's confirmation that the direction is right. The number becomes real on a Wednesday. You run the numbers the way you've run them 100 times before. And this time they clear. 7 figures. You thought this moment would feel like a finish line, like a deep exhale after years of holding your breath. Instead, it's quiet. Profoundly, disorientingly quiet. There's no reference point for this in your family's vocabulary. Your parents don't have language for what you just became. So you call your mother and talk for 20 minutes without mentioning the number. You hang up and sit in the silence for a long time. The money solves old problems and immediately reveals an entirely new set of problems you didn't know existed. Tax structures, asset protection, how to pass this on without destroying the next generation's hunger. You realize that becoming a millionaire isn't the end of the financial education. It's the beginning of a harder one. You go home for the holidays. The house smells the same. The table is still slightly uneven. Everything is the same. Except there's a gap now. Not between you and your family, you love them the same, maybe more. The gap is between the life you left and the life you're living. You pay for dinner. There's a micro-silence afterward that lasts just long enough to be uncomfortable. You start losing people who aren't leaving. Old friends treat you differently. Some become quieter, some become louder, testing. One makes a comment that lands wrong and never really gets addressed. There's also the guilt. The very specific guilt of being the one who made it while watching people you love still carry weight you could lift, but not knowing how to lift it without changing the relationship forever. You carry that weight quietly. Here's what nobody tells you about being the first. You don't just break the ceiling for yourself. You remove it entirely for everyone who comes after you. Your kids, or the kids you'll have, will look up and see open sky. They'll assume that's just what sky looks like. Unlimited. Obvious. Available. They won't know about the years you stared at the underside of something most people in your family never thought to question. They won't know about the 3 a.m. moments, the specific loneliness of milestones with no reference point, the dinner conversations where you couldn't explain what you were carrying. And that's exactly right. That's the whole point. You didn't do this for a trophy. You did this so the next one doesn't have to start where you started. That's what generational wealth actually is. It's not a number. It's a different starting line. You built it out of a coffee can, a tight jaw, and a family that loved you inside the only walls they knew how to build. You took the invisible ceiling and made it the floor. The view from here is heavier than you imagined. Quieter. More real. And you wouldn't trade it for any version of easier. If this video hit something real in you, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment below. Are you the first in your family to think this way about money? Or are you trying to become the first? You didn't just cross a finish line. You moved one. And now you carry that, not as a burden exactly, but as a responsibility you wouldn't give back if you could. I'll see you in the next one.